Hello there, my name is Leo Bell and I am the Wellbeing Lead with Sutton Uplift. And in today's session, we are going to be talking about how to cope with becoming a dad, also known as our perinatal workshop for dads. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is a workshop that I have run in the community before. Initially, it was run as 2 workshops that were about 90 minutes to 2 hours each. Generally, what we would do was I would go through some of the content, and there would be periods where there would be an open discussion during the workshop. So sort of an open informal chat in which everyone that sort of showed up would be able to talk about their experiences of being with a dad as a dad and sort of passing on cool things that they learn and information that they sort of picked up in their time of being a dad. But we felt that it would be really cool to try and offer this as an online platform so that if there's something that you've been struggling with, you know someone who's been struggling, you can just send that video over. So I'm going to do my best to fill in the blanks where there would be space for conversation and discussion. Yeah, you'll see as we get along. I'll probably throw in some of my own 2 cents. I'll talk about some past experiences that we've had in these workshops, and we will get along from there. But there is still a lot of information that I cover as well outside of these sort of discussion bits. I would just, let's say, have a pencil or a pen and paper handy. Yeah. So what we do in these workshops is we go around the room and we would sort of introduce ourselves as we'd like to be addressed. And then I read a short story from one of my staff that is or was a recent dad. So I'll just go, my name's Leo and I'd like to be addressed as Leo. As there's no one else here, I'm going to move right on to the story. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from my notes. I can remember my partner's pregnancy with my first son. She felt a bit sick and was tired in the evenings, but it was a nice time. We had an excuse to leave places early and no arguments about who was the designated driver. I remember coming home after my son was born, and then it really hit me. We had this tiny, vulnerable thing in our home which did nothing but cry and wake us up at night. I was always tired, felt bored at home, brackets, babies don't do much, close bracket, and noticed our relationship wasn't the same. We were both tired all the time, and I missed spending time just the two of us. The worst thing was feeling guilty. I felt guilty for going to work, guilty for wanting to spend time with my friends, guilty for not experiencing this magical bond with my new son, guilty for wanting sex when she didn't. I remember going to the pub for the first time after a few months, and my mate said, "Where have you been? You've disappeared off the radar a bit." I realized he had no idea what I was going through, and I just felt so isolated. Now, I'm sure that there's a number of things in this story that you can relate to. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you can't relate to as well. Or maybe a lot of this doesn't apply to you. And it's important to think about your own story, as it were. Not everyone, this is not a cookie cutter life. Not everyone's experiences are the same. Some of the things that my colleague might struggle with, you might not struggle with. And some of the things that they didn't struggle with, you might have struggled with. I mean, the theme of being tired and the theme of missing time spent together with your partner is something that I have seen very commonly in this line of work. And the guilt is something that as well I've sort of heard. I also hear it doesn't mention it specifically here, but something that has come up a lot in previous workshops as well when I've been running this is it mentions here that, and then it really hit me. We had this tiny vulnerable thing in the home which did nothing but cry and wake us up at night. Now, very often that point sticks with people because you have this tiny vulnerable thing and it's an awful lot of responsibility, and that responsibility is scary and you don't really know what necessarily to do with that responsibility. So it can be quite overwhelming and it can be quite intimidating, especially when you're not sure what to do. But we're going to talk about these sort of emotions and how to cope with these emotions and how to sort of manage these stresses throughout this workshop. But that's the story. Okay, so this would be the first week in which we'd be going through a bunch of things, but because I'm going to do this all in one package, we're going to this slide basically. So over the 2 weeks and over the course of this workshop mainly, so we're going to ignore the 2 week idea, but in the course of this video, we're going to be looking at coping strategies for when it feels overwhelming. We're going to talk about how to adapt to a new routine. We're going to discuss about noticing feelings and sitting with feelings and emotions and understanding where does it all come from, so that it doesn't feel quite just alien and overwhelming. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about self-compassion as well, and some tools. And with a lot of these things we're going to talk about different tools to help us manage these different things better. So we'll talk about different tools for coping strategies. We'll talk about tools for setting up a new routine, tools for noticing your feelings and checking in with those feelings and emotions, and also talking about like tools to help with self-compassion and ways that you can strengthen those tools. I would now ask you to reflect, what are your experiences of being a new dad? Now, normally I have a space and I have people in front of me and they talk for a while and these conversations can get quite in depth. But what I'm going to say that you do is you get out that pen and you get out that paper, and I just want you to title a piece of paper, what are your experiences of being a new dad? And then I just want you to write everything that comes to mind. Good, bad, ugly, beautiful, I don't care. Put it all down in paper. Don't even really think about what you're writing down. What I want you to do is I just want you to empty your mind. It might be 1 page, it might be 2 pages, it might be 3 pages, it might be more, it might be less. Don't worry about it. Just keep writing. Write about all of your experiences of being a new dad, your fears, your trepidations, the good bits, the bad bits, like I say, and take your time with it and note it. Okay, so depending on what you wrote, some themes might have come up. So some ideas passed on by my colleague of things that might come into your mind in terms of experiences of being a new dad. There is that sense of having to go back to work and the struggle that can bring. There is the feeling of can't help with some things. This is especially prevalent, I find, with guys that are just not sure what to do. They're not sure how to help sometimes, and they can feel like that the mother is the expert and that they're not very useful, and then that can just add to feelings of shame and guilt. But you are useful, and it is important. And then I suppose this leads into the next line, the feeling excluded from mum and baby's special bond. If you don't have high self-esteem, then sometimes this can translate into feeling that you don't matter as much as you really do. And the important thing to note is that you do really matter. It's just sometimes it's hard to really notice these things. Changes to relationship with partner. This is very, very common, especially if you are taking turns managing the baby. So very often I see couples that take turns to look after the baby. So one will be up half the night, one will be up the other half of the night, and they won't see each other very much the whole day. And one of the things, very quickly, straight off the bat, so change the relationship with partner. What I recommend to people, and I'm going to bring this up later as well, is I talk a little bit when I talk about planning and scheduling stuff. I talk about putting in little wins, and the first little win I can recommend to you, and the one that I will recommend later, but I'll just mention it now, is to give your partner a hug first thing when you wake up. It's a really small one. You can do it when you're I don't know the right expression. When you're in the handover process, as it were, one person's clocking out, you're clocking in, looking after the baby. Even then, just a quick hug, such an easy thing to put on your tick list, such an easy win, and it means that you build some momentum towards the rest of the day. And finally, lifestyle changes. So with this enormous responsibility that's come into your life, it's only natural that we're going to have an impact on the other aspects of your world. Your whole world is slightly different now that you have this thing that's completely reliant on you. And so you will find that you have less time for friendship groups. You will have less time for hobbies because more of that time is being directed towards taking care of the little one that really needs it. But as you'll see later on, it is important to not remove these sort of things. Even though you might hang out with your friends less or maybe have less time for your hobbies, it doesn't mean that they have to go completely. So we talk in my team, we kind of have two different ways, two different metaphors, analogies, whatever word you want to use, to talk about mental health and stress. And the first one that I'm going to talk about, because it's on the screen, is the bucket. So imagine that, or pretend that each one of us carries around a stress bucket. Over our day, weeks, and months, our bucket fills up with all different types of stress. So this could be work stress, relationship stress, health stress, baby stress. See where I'm going here? It could be stress that you put on yourself. This is something I see very often with new dads. The bucket fills up pretty fast, or the bucket fills up pretty quickly. And some of us have bigger buckets than others, but at some stage, we all have to allow that stress to flow out the bucket. And that can be done by turning the tap at the bottom. It's also worth noting that some of us, especially if you grew up in a traumatic sort of upbringing or stressful life, then your bucket might be already full with quite a lot of water right now. So it's not necessarily that you have a small bucket if you feel overwhelmed. It might just be that you have a lot of bucket already, a lot of water in your bucket already. So sorry, where was I? Some of us are bigger buckets than others, but at some stage we have to allow that stress to flow out of the bucket. And that can be done by turning the tap at the bottom. When the tap works, we can think of this as us using effective coping strategies to let the stress go. And when we use less effective coping strategies, our tap isn't able to turn. Another way you kind of view this is when you go and do these positive coping mechanisms, it's like drilling a hole in the bucket. So water just naturally flows out. So you engage with a hobby, or you talk to your friend about stuff that's going on. That's drilling a hole in the bucket, so the water starts to seep out. So even if water's coming in, doing these positive coping mechanisms just mean the water falls out faster. Obviously, we want to look at ways to prevent the bucket from overflowing. So for example, something like rapid relaxation in response to stressful situations can be described as opening the tap when extra stress is flowing to the bucket. So a couple examples of a rapid relaxation thing. So we will talk a little bit more about guided muscle relaxation, those sort of things, but I'll give you a couple off the top of my head. I'll give you the easiest two. The first is what we call box breathing. You've probably heard this before, but the concept is you hold your breath and you breathe, and everything's 4 seconds long. So you're breathing in for 4 seconds, you'll then hold your breath for 4 seconds, you'll then breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath out for 4 seconds. So I'm going to do this twice for you. So notice I'm breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, and then holding for 4 seconds. And then I'm repeating the process. And so forth and so forth. So I could do that maybe 10 times, 20 times, and then just see how that affects me. Another thing you can do is what's called the physiological sigh. This is famed by, I heard it from Huberman, but you hear it from lots of sources. The concept here is you breathe in through your nose. When you get near the top of your breath, you take an extra sharp inhalation through your nose, and then you breathe out through your mouth. I'll just also mention here that with the box breathing, you can breathe in through your nose and out through your nose, or you can breathe in through your nose and out of your mouth. It doesn't matter too much, but what I will say is that breathing in through your nose is really important. But with the physiological sigh, it's breathing in through your nose and then sharp inhalation through the nose and then breathing out through the mouth. So I'll do it a couple of times. So breathing in through the nose, at the top, and a sharp inhalation, and then sighing it out through the mouth. So I'll do one now without talking through it. And the key is that you want your out breath to be as long as possible. And what these things do is they just slow down your breathing, slow down your heart rate, lower the carbon dioxide levels in your blood, and in turn, all of this helps to calm you down. And these are simple ways that you can quickly reduce the water in your bucket or the stress levels you feel in your body. There are also things that cause the bucket to fill up very quickly and overflow very quickly. And some of these things, this is more just to note this. So don't do these things, basically, because they cause your bucket to fill up very quickly. So making snap decisions that you might regret later. saying yes to all requests, so being a people pleaser, for example, can do this. Becoming angry or confrontational, so letting your frustration build up so that you're no longer in control of your emotions and then lashing out. Yeah, these sort of things all cause your buckets to just fill up super quickly. I'm also going to just note here that what we don't want to do is we don't want to lean in too much into negative coping mechanisms. So what is that? Well, it's the things that feel good that require absolutely no effort. So the obvious one is drink and drugs, because those make you feel really good without you actually having to do anything. There's no cost to it. So what happens is you get that instant feeling of feeling good, but the feeling bad debt is going to come and get you later on down the line. And so what happens is people become more reliant on these bad coping mechanisms it's imagine that you have drank alcohol, you've woken up with a hangover, and you decide that the only way to get rid of the hangover is to drink more alcohol. It's kind of like that, and it's like that with all of these negative coping mechanisms. Dealing with stress. Self-care is important when you're caring for others. After all, you can't pour from an empty cup. Admittedly, especially when recently becoming a parent, it can be hard to find the time to look after oneself. And this is when I open up the discussion. What do you guys do to look after yourselves? And this kind of opens up a space in which people can talk about their hobbies, the things they enjoy, the things that bring them life. I kind of talk about these sort of things as things that make your heart grow, things that you really enjoy, something that you can get lost in. Is a good example of that sort of stuff. So self-care is really important. I mean, I'll go. So some of the things that I do to look after myself, I am a big proponent of exercise, even if it's just a short walk. I try to do something every day. Getting out in sunlight is really important for you. It's currently winter in England right now, so it's not very bright for very often, and during the next hour, it's going to get significantly darker even now. But it's important to try and get sunlight when you can. The best times to get sunlight are the first 3 hours after sunrise, even if it's just 10-20 minutes being outside, and that's really good for you in a number of ways. But then also seeing if you ever have seen a sunset, you can see before the sunset you get those pinky orange sort of colors in the sky. Those colors are really good to look at as well. So I always try to get outside a little bit and get some sunlight. Even if it's overcast, it still counts to your body. So trust me, it's a really good thing to do. So I do that. I do lots of other exercise things. I used to box, I've done weightlifting, jiu-jitsu, yoga, you name it, I've probably done it. All of these things have validity. I think that health is wealth. So it's really important to do some sort of exercise. Nutrition is also an important thing that you can do to take care of yourself. And when I say nutrition, I'm not going to start banging on the drum of any particular veganism or carnivore diet or anything like that, keto, etc. I mean, there are some arguments for each of these diets that there is validity to them and whatever. But the rule of thumb that I give my clients is that reduce your sugar so that it's as low as possible, and reduce your caffeine as much as possible. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours, so it can really impact you, especially if you've built up quite a large amount of caffeine over, let's just say, chronic use over a long period of time. It does only take a week for your brain to reset its receptors for caffeine. So you only have to have a week off in order for your brain to be like it was before you'd ever had caffeine. But reducing caffeine, reducing sugar, drinking enough water, getting in exercise. I love hot baths. I love hot stuff in general. So a hot bath, a sauna, a hot shower, all these things are great. I like the smell of lavender. I'm just talking about me now, but what else do I do? The other stuff I like to do is I like to get lost in certain things. So for me, it's things like painting is something that I'm a big fan of. Writing is also a good thing. Even if I'm just writing a journal, I can find it quite rewarding, especially if it's to reflect back on me, my emotions. Hanging out with friends, I really find good because it allows me to escape my own mind, even if it's just for a short period of time. This doesn't have to be in person, I must stress. I must stress. It doesn't have to be in person, it can be over the phone. A lot of my friends really like FaceTiming, and I find that's really good as well. It's a really nice way to see people and connect with them when you can't physically be with them. And the last thing that I would say I do is I really cherish the little victories, and I cherish the silly things that I like. So When there's a boxing fight on that I'm really looking forward to, I really get into it. I get some Doritos and some salsa and I make a big deal out of it. I try to like watch it around with friends if I can, or get a friend to come watch it with me, like make an event of it kind of thing. Or it will be like little things that I really like. So I'm a big fan of pro wrestling, is something I really like. And I really like random cooking shows. So MasterChef is really fun and I really enjoy Bake Off. So what I do is I don't care what people think. I get in my pajamas, I get cozy, I put a dressing gown on, and I watch these silly programs and I get into it and I really enjoy it. And I'll message people I know, and it's about having, and I try to lean into these things that I like without being ashamed about it. And I try to lean into relaxing, like stressing out my body in a controlled manner. So exercising and putting my body in stress, but voluntarily putting it in stress, and then voluntarily relaxing my body. So that's a few of the things. But I mean, like you wrote with the letter before, write these things down, write the things down that you do for yourself. Because what happens very often is that we know the things that we like and we know the things that help keep us calm and help de-stress us. But when we have a baby and we have a lot of responsibility and we don't have that much time, we just don't do any of them. And then we start to forget these things that we do. So even just writing it down and noting, oh yeah, I used to really like doing that. I'm going to do a little bit more of that. I'm going to make time for that later today, or I'm going to make time for that tomorrow, and prioritizing yourself. Just making that decision can be quite important. Okay, it's not changing slide. Okay, right, it has changed slide now. So, dealing with stress as dad tips. So I'm going to go through. So breathing exercise, kind of already done that in the previous slide. There'll be a link in the timestamp in the description below for you to jump to that if you have jumped to this section. So a couple of slides ago. So I'm going to go through these bits bit by bit. So taking some time out. So kind of linking into the previous slide. So write a list of things you could do and keep it on your phone for when you need 20 minutes for yourself. You could let your partner know what you were doing and maybe return the favor. Any ideas is what I'd ask the group. So I've got the examples here. I've got read the chapter of a book, have a go at a guitar, go for a run, play for a video game, watch an episode of a TV show you like, give a friend a call, all these things. I mean, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. It could be for as long or as short as you need. Next, listen to your music. Take a break from nursery rhymes and put on your favorite album with the kids. They might enjoy something decent on as well as you. My my children are going to be very much inundated with lots of 50 Cent and Eminem, so I hope they enjoy that. Write down your worries. Sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by lots of niggling worries. Writing things down can help you make a plan to tackle some of them and means you don't have to keep everything in your head. This is really important, just this concept of putting stuff down on paper. So I'm going to give two specific reasons why it's so important. The first is that it actually allows you to see what's going on in your head. Just having it on paper means it's not just trapped in your head. We have this tendency as humans to cling on to thoughts, so cling on to worry, because if we don't start thinking about the worry, then we might forget about it, and then suddenly the whole world's going to fall apart. Well, just writing it down on a piece of paper means it doesn't have to live on your head. It is now on the piece of paper. You don't have to go back to it straight away. You can go back to it anytime. There's no rush, but just having it on that piece of paper just gets it out of here. This is really good if you're struggling to sleep as well. So if you are struggling to sleep, write down all your worries on a piece of paper and put it in a drawer. And then at least you know you can come back to it at a later time. But having it out of your head is really important. The second thing that I always say to people about journaling is that, well, think of it like this. Your brain thinks very quickly. Especially when I work with people with anxiety or really struggling with stress, there's almost like there's 5 plates spinning in front of them, and they're going like this. They're literally trying to grab every plate and spin it as fast as possible, and they have no idea what's going on with the plates. They can just see the plates that are wobbling, and then they go and spin them a little bit more and make them so they have all this stuff going on, and they just can't seem to settle down. Well, when you write, you're forced to think at the pace that you're writing. So the way I'm trying to say this is that you cannot think as you cannot write as fast as thoughts will come into your head. And the actual process of physically writing something down, pen on paper, not on a computer, but pen on paper, it physically forces your thought pattern to slow down. And that can be really good. And it can allow more rational thought, a little bit more clarity in one's thoughts, etc. Finally, I'm going to go through a couple of these simple grounding techniques. So the first one, okay, so listening, I hope. Place both feet flat on the floor. Lean back into your chair and make note of the feeling of the chair under you and against your back. Cross your arms over your chest, or if you're in a public place, put your hands on top of your knees. I'm going to put it on across my chest because you can see it. Gently tap your shoulders or your knees if you're doing that, alternating one side at a time. Just do this for just a minute, maybe less, maybe swap over after 30 seconds. And just doing this for a minute or so will just slow you down. The plates are not all going to fall if you're not constantly spinning them. It's all right to take a moment to ground yourself in the present, stop thinking about the past, stop thinking about the future, and just be mindful of what's going on right now. Another thing you can do if you don't like tapping on your chest or your knees, or you didn't think that worked for you, is something called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game. You can Google 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game and you'll see it is a common sensory awareness grounding exercise that many find as a helpful tool to relax or get through difficult moments. And what you do is you describe 5 things you can see in the room, and you want to get specific. So I'm going to do it. I can see a bee mug with some hot chocolate in it. I can see my iPhone in its red case. I can see my crochet bee that a colleague bought for me at an outreach event. I can see a 1.5 litre Buxton bottle of water. And I can also see, I mean, I can see more, but I can see, I'm not associated with this brand in any way, but I have a Bulldog Skincare Sensitive Moisturizer at 100 mils. So 5 things I can see in the room. 4 things I can feel. And again, I'm being specific. So I can feel my feet on the floor. So my feet in my shoes on the floor. I can feel like the air the air in my nose. It's not warm, it's not cold, but it's not great, to be honest. I can feel my mouth and the saliva in my mouth because I've been talking quite a while already, and I need to have a drink of water soon. And I can feel my butt on this kneeling stool thing that I've got here, and it's not the most comfy thing in the world, but it does make me have good posture. 3 things I can hear right now. Well, the first thing obviously I can hear is my voice rattling away in this room, reading out these slides. The next thing I can hear is I can hear my laptop wearing away. It sounds like it's going to take off. And then the final thing I can hear some construction work in the distance. That's what you get for living in South London. 2 things I can smell right now. I can smell what's left of the hot chocolate I had earlier, and I can smell I have a lot of house plants, so I've got a little bit of a smell of the house plants in my room. You can also do 2 smells you like if you can't smell 2 things. So mine would probably be orange and lavender would be my 2 smells. And name 1 good thing about yourself. I am a great orator, wouldn't you agree? Um, so I'm just going to read through the last bit of these notes. In order to effectively use this technique, you have to really examine each thing you're describing. So the example given here is you say a white wooden door rather than just saying I can see a door kind of thing. You probably noticed that whilst I was doing this example. Another thing you can do is have a grounding object. So these could be things like essential oils, crystals, jewelry, statue, a stress ball, something with sentimental value. So mine might be this bee, for example, and when I want to ground and be in the present, I'll just know, all right, I hold the bee kind of thing. It's similar to the tapping of the shoulders, but with it, instead of tapping, you actually have an object that you physically hold and you go, okay, I'm now going to not be in the past or the future, I'm going to be in the present. And with that, I'll give a saying I like to say to my clients: if you live in the past, you'll be depressed. If you live in the future, you will be anxious. If you live in the present, you will find peace. So doing all these things, along with other stuff like meditation, is very good for living in the present. Okay, so creating a new routine. New responsibilities mean lots can change in your life. Less evenings in the pub or in the gym, less time with your partner or meeting friends. Don't despair. Many new parents tell us they learn to be more efficient with their time and still manage to fit lots in. You've had a really, really big change in lifestyle. It's only natural that there's going to be some teething problems and that you're going to have some. I mean, like, you're supposed to make mistakes in this. You wouldn't get it perfect first straight away. Life wouldn't be any fun if that happened. So a couple of exercises that we can do together. So i.e. you're going to do right now. Write a list. So pen and paper out again. Write a list of things you realistically would like to fit in a week. What compromises can you make? So for example, you can't make, you don't have time to go to the gym 3 times a week. So you don't have time to go there, get changed, do a long workout, have a shower there, get changed, come back. But can you find a really good YouTube video, a really good YouTube workout to do at home instead? So can you, instead of going physically to a gym, can you do Joe Wicks for a short time, at least until you start to have more free time, and then you can start going back to the gym. Another one that you can do, another exercise, write down a schedule to remind yourself when to do things and discuss this schedule with your partner. They might want to do the same, so be prepared to compromise. And an easy tool that can relieve stress, especially daily stresses, is effective planning and getting organized. So this is when I now would ask the room, do you have any techniques that are helping you to stay organized? So stuff that I do, I create a couple of must wins for the day, and then I like to add things to a calendar that I have in my room. Yeah, so little wins and then having a general sort of calendar is what I do. The reason why being organized is actually an effective planning and getting organized is so good for you. I'm just going to talk about this before I go into the to-do list. It's because it reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty is a universal fear amongst humans. We don't like uncertainty because uncertainty can bring dangers with it. It's why we're scared of the dark. There is not a human alive that doesn't have some sort of fear of the dark. And the reason why is because you don't know what's in the dark, and our primal brain does not know if there is a predator in the dark. And the same can be said with uncertainty in general. There's the expression, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, and that kind of links into the uncertainty aspect of things. Having a schedule, having a plan, having an idea what you want to do with a day, it really, really just helps to lower that general anxiety because you have that focus, you have that direction, you have that goal that you are moving towards. I'm going to have a sip of water while you mull that over. Okay, so creating to-do lists can be very helpful. If you are feeling overwhelmed by the amount of things on the list, you can mark 2 things as priorities. This is what I call little wins. For example, the one I gave earlier, give your partner a hug. If you get around to other points on the list, that's great. But if it's not, that's okay too. Think about what really needs to get done. What can wait? Could you do the laundry a day later? I personally use a notepad that has my daily schedule on the left and then a to-do list on the right. That is how I start my working day. Of course, this is individual. Some people prefer to use online calendars. I use both, but whatever. Um, when creating a daily list, make sure the structure, actually, no, it's a lie. So I'd use an online calendar and then I'd use a to-do list. I probably wouldn't have the daily schedule on as well. When writing a daily list, make sure to structure your day and importantly, plan in breaks. We cannot pour from an empty cup, as we said earlier. Another helpful tool is having a master diary where you write down all the tasks that need to be done. Review this daily or weekly and sort the points in order of priority. Importantly, schedule in buffer days to catch up on things you haven't got to doing. So long story short, it's really good to have some sort of direction, but we're not in the SAS or the army. So it doesn't have to be military regimented. There is flexibility. It's important to have some sort of flexibility in your deadlines. I personally find that I work much better with that. If you have too many deadlines, it can just add to stress. But having some sort of direction is good, but being kind to yourself and not being too militant with these sort of things. So some other tips for this: making tasks visible through a whiteboard or using sticky notes, which I love doing, put them all over the place. Set reminders on your phone. Use apps like the Forest app, which you can use so that Forest app is an example of an app that your phone has that when you're using it, you can't use any other apps on the phone. It's basically to stop you being on your phone so much. You can even do these sort of things for a laptop. You just basically have to Google self-control apps. Something that's really important, not really important, but really useful to know is that if you do have a phone, the easiest way to stop being on it is to put it somewhere where it's hidden, which is further than arm distance away. So I'm just going to chuck it across the room. But you can put it, if you have a drawer, maybe in another room, putting it in there is going to make a massive difference to your usage of it. Final tip here, once you have finished your task, you can reward yourself. In brackets, although ticking off things our to-do list is satisfying itself. But yes, do reward yourself when you do the things that you put on your to-do list. So we don't have to worry about this slide, but do this would be the end of the first workshop, but do have a think about what you would take home from today's workshop. Okay, so this would be the start of the second workshop. I'm going to start. Yeah, let's get right into it. So this is the emotional side of being a parent. So being a parent can be amazing at times. It can also feel overwhelming and exhausting, and sometimes the coping strategies we discussed last week aren't available to us. Maybe you try to arrange a romantic meal with your partner, but the kids just won't stay in bed. Or the idea of getting up 15 minutes earlier seems like a joke after a sleepless night. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed and find it hard to look after ourselves in these moments. So now try to imagine this from the context of someone that's listened to the first part of this talk and has gone away and tried to implement some of the tools that I suggested earlier, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Now this is frustrating. This can feel quite you can feel quite despondent afterwards that you heard these great tips from this great guy who talked about all these tips that will help, and I tried to do them and it didn't work. There's no hope for me, kind of thing. And all of these things start tying into our emotions. So I can't stop life from happening. Life is stressful. Life is not fair. We all are doing our best, but to a certain extent, we can build that resilience within us. So I can't stop life from hitting you, but what I can do is I can make you stronger so that when life does hit you, you don't get knocked back quite as far. And the way that we do this, there is no secret code that I give you. There's no magic pill. The first way that we start doing it is we start tuning in to our feelings. So the reason that this is so important is because what can happen is it can become a bit of a snowball. So People that are anxious start to feel more anxious when they notice that they're getting anxious. So they're becoming anxious about being anxious. When I work with clients that are especially depressed, they can be upset that they have depression. So they are getting more depressed because they have depression. And another example is one that I see all the time is shame. People feel shame that they are ashamed of something. So say there is someone with an eating disorder, which is what I see quite often. Someone with an eating disorder, they feel shame that they have the shame of their eating disorder and the fact that they're ashamed of it. So the shame just piles on. There's no way out of that, as it were, if you're looking at it without any tools. So what I'm trying to do here is I really want you to tune in to how you're feeling physically. So let's say you're anxious or let's say that, I mean, anxiety works in this case because very often when I work with perinatal dads, the issue is related to lots of high stress and anxiety around feeling that stress. So when I have someone that's really anxious, what I do is I say, okay, shut your eyes. I mean, some people are too anxious to even shut their eyes, but turn your attention inwards regardless. Check in with how you, and I want you, if you're listening to this, shut your eyes, or at the very least, turn your attention inwards. So, do you notice physical things? What's your heart doing? Is your heart beating fast? Is your heart racing? Does it feel like your heart might blow out of your chest? What are your muscles saying? Are your muscles tense? Are your shoulders tense? Are your shoulders right by your ears? Is your jaw tense? What are you doing with your teeth? Are your teeth together? Is your jaw clenched? Are your hands in fists? Are your toes held? Is your foot bouncing up and down? Do you have restless leg? All these sort of things. When you notice that you have these physical sensations, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about, so let's say it's someone with anxiety. Are you thinking about future plans or a future event you have to go to? Maybe you have to call a friend or something. Maybe you have to go out for dinner. Maybe you're going on a date. Maybe you're going to a party. Maybe you're going to your party. Is this, when you think this, do you notice that you physically feel more, that your heart is racing and that your muscles are tense? What are the behaviors that you feel? What is the thing that you want to do that will, what do you feel like your behaviors, what you'll get is you'll get temptations to escape the feeling that you have right now. Often when we do things like check our phone, drink, do drugs, all of these sort of behaviors, they are escapism from the emotion that we are currently feeling. And what emotions do you feel when you check in? So when you check in and you feel that your heart is racing and you notice that you're thinking about something in the future, you're thinking about, oh, how am I going to look after this kid? And your behavior is, oh, I'm just going to go on Instagram or TikTok for a while, or I'm going to just go out, I'm just going to go and have a drink, or I'm going to just turn my phone in airplane mode and hide in bed. And you notice these thought patterns and you notice these behaviors that you're attempting and you notice how you're physically feeling. What emotions do you notice that come up for yourself? Do you feel curious? Do you feel irritated? Do you feel shame? Do you feel fear? What is it that the emotion that's actually arising? So this is something that you can do now. This is something you can do multiple times, but check in. Either close your eyes or turn your attention inwards. Think about what you notice physically. Think about what your thoughts are. Think about what the behaviors you are tempted to engage in are, and think what the underlying emotions are. Okay. Checking in with yourself can be helpful when you are feeling overwhelmed. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? So this is all coming back to the previous slide. See if you can put a label to how you are feeling. Uncertain about your abilities as a dad, angry when the kids misbehave, frustrated when date night is cancelled once again, hurt at not feeling listened to by your partner. What values do you think those feelings represent? Are you angry because you want your kids to grow up with good moral standards? Frustrated because you want to maintain a loving relationship? Hurt because you don't feel valued? And what does that signify? Why do you not feel valued? Um, why do you feel uncertain about your abilities as a dad? Like, is that a self-esteem issue? Where is that coming from, kind of thing? Try to identify what values are behind your feelings and think about how you can behave accordingly to those values. For example, date night is cancelled again because your partner is feeling too tired. The feeling that you have is frustration. The value is because you want to maintain a good relationship and be a good partner. So what can you do instead? Offer to run your partner a bath. Could you have dinner at home? Try to help them feel loved instead of arguing with them. So you can see that although the original idea is not going to happen, you are not going to go out to have dinner, you can still match the value. And by matching up the value with the new situation, you will be able to overcome at least some of the feeling of frustration. So maybe I was wrong when I said earlier that this would be the end of the first thing. But anyway, on to week 2. I remember, so another story from one of the dads at Sun Uplift. And when I read this out, I would like you to think, how do you relate to this story? But it's also important to note how you do not relate to this story. I remember taking the kids to the park on my own. My son on his bike and my daughter in the pushchair. Halfway round, he, aka the son, predictably, didn't want to cycle anymore and told me to carry the bike. I felt a flash of annoyance and frustration. My ideal walk in the park with the kids was spoilt. I called him lazy and tugged his arm all the way home to try and make a point. Thinking about it later, I realised that all I really wanted, brackets, my value, was to have fun together. It was me that had spoiled things. The next time we went to the park the same thing happened. This time I took a breath, balanced the bike on the buggy, and suggested we race each other home. We ended up laughing together, and I felt much better about it. So think about how this can relate to you, but also note how we have the situation, the feeling caused by that situation, the value that kind of got blown out of the water at the first trip to the park, but then how the adjustment to the behavior meant that the value was still matched and the feeling of frustration had been reduced. So it's important to be kind to ourselves. Being a parent isn't easy, and we will often do things we're not proud of. View the previous slide. What is it like when you think about those times? How do you talk to yourself? So what does your internal voice say to you when these things happen? Does it say things like, I am not a good dad, the kids don't like me as much as they like their mother, I am no fun, I used to be more fun when I was younger before I had kids, etc. Now, how does it feel to hear those things? Would you say that to a friend who is going through a similar situation to yourself? Now, the reason that I bring all this up is because I want you to be better at self-compassion. Now, the reason that we did the previous slide was because it was to highlight that we are really, really quite harsh to ourselves. We can all be borderline cruel to ourselves at times. And the most important aspect that I give to people when it comes to self-compassion is reframing how we talk to oneself. So instead of talking to yourself like you always have in this really critical voice, I want you to start talking to yourself as though you were talking to your best friend. Think about times when a close friend feels really bad about him or herself, or is really struggling in some way. How would you respond to your friend in this situation, especially when you are the best version of yourself? What do you typically do? What do you say? And note the tone in which you typically talk to your friends. Now, think about times when you feel bad about yourself or you are struggling. How do you typically respond to yourself in these situations? Now, I want you to take a pen, a piece of paper, and I want you to write down what you typically do, what you typically say, and note the tone in which you talk to yourself, and then compare that to how you would talk to a friend. Did you notice a difference? If so, ask yourself why. What factors or fears come into play that lead you to treat yourself and others so differently. Have a little think about why we might think this way. It helps our friends, so why do we not do this for ourselves? So a way that we can work on our self-compassion is to create a self-compassion journal. Try keeping a daily self-compassion journal for 1 week or longer if you like. I mean, I'm going to just tell you, try to do it for 1 day and see how you get on, and then try and do it for another day. And just even if you're just writing 3 words, like I should love myself today, and then write I should really love myself tomorrow, and then the third day you start writing I should love myself because blah 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 blah. It's the consistency that matters. Journaling is an expressive journaling is an effective way to express emotions and has been found to enhance both mental and physical well-being. At some point during the evening, when you have a few quiet moments, review the day's events. In your journal, write down anything you feel bad about, anything you judged yourself for, or any difficult experience that caused you pain. For example, perhaps you got angry at a waitress at lunch because she took forever to bring the check. You made a rude comment and stormed off without leaving a tip. Afterwards, you felt ashamed and embarrassed. For each event, use mindfulness, a common sense of humanity, and kindness to process the event in a more self-compassionate way. Okay, so what is assertiveness? So assertiveness is a way of thinking and behaving that allows a person to stand up for his or her rights while respecting the rights of others. One way we can improve our self-confidence is through communication. Communication is key to enable us to express our confidence and our assertiveness. So it is not you telling someone what to do. It is also not you just accepting what someone else wants you to do. It's not passive, it's not aggressive, it's that fine line between the two. So following on from the last slide, we can view communication as being on a scale, on a spectrum. On one end, we have passive communication, so being compliant, submissive, talks little, is vague, non-committal communication, puts self down, praises others. So an example of someone saying, I don't mind, that's fine, yeah, all right. So a bit of a sheep. And the belief is, you're okay, I'm not. Uh, so using this style conveys having no opinion other than the one of the other person and believing that other people are always more important. So it doesn't matter what you think anyway. On the other end of this spectrum, on the other end of this scale, we have aggressive communication. So sarcastic, harsh, always right, superior, know-it-all, interrupts, talks over other people, critical, putting down, patronizing, disrespecting others. This is what we are doing. I'm okay, you're not, being the belief. This conveys, so this sort of communication style conveys that they are entitled to have things done their way, the way they want it to be done, because they are right and others, brackets plus their needs, are less important. What we want to do is we want to reach that perfect little middle area, which is assertive communication. So actions and expressions fit with words spoken, firm but polite and clear messages, respectful of self and others. An example of this communication is that's a good idea, and how about if we did this too? Or I can see that, but I'd really like this also, etc. I'm okay, you're okay, being the belief. We're all just people at the end of the day. Being assertive means that actions and expressions fit with words spoken. It is about being firm but polite and having a clear message, but being respectful of yourself and of others. A person with assertive communication style believes or acts as if all individuals involved are equal, each deserving of respect, and no one is more entitled than the other to have things done their way. Are you aware of your most dominant communication style? We want you now to think about how each style might behave in terms of body language. Communication is also found in our body language, and in fact, more information is conveyed in non-verbal than in verbal cues. It's about 70 to 30%, maybe 65, 65, 35, but I don't know. Not in the specific numbers anyway. So now I ask you, how do you think a passive or aggressive person communicates with their posture? What are the consequences of being passive or aggressive? So for example, passive So let's talk about some body sort of language stuff. So eyes, avoids eye contact, looks down. I am not a threat. Don't see me as a threat. And you'll see this with the other ones as well. Hands, clammy or fidgety hands. Posture makes their body smaller, hunched shoulders. So literally taking up less space and not making eye contact so that they're almost invisible. And it's this, I am not a threat. I am not a threat. Please don't hurt me kind of impression. The consequences of these behaviors, it's really simple. You're giving in to others. You don't get what you want or you need, all the things you need. Self-critical thoughts, miserable. The feeling that people are walking all over you. All right, let's now go to the other end of the spectrum, aggressive. So aggressive sort of body language stuff. So eyes, narrow, emotionless, staring, expressionless, so quite cold. Hands, pointing fingers, making fists, clenched, hand on hips. So this is very much not invisible behavior. It's very much visible body language. Posture, make body bigger, upright, heads high, shoulders out, hands on feet, hips, feet apart. So it's not, it's like these sort of things can be good in small sort of bursts, but imagine you have someone who has hands on their hips, is very much sort of clenching their fingers onto their hips, is staring right at you without blinking, really has their chest puffed out, really is taking up an awful lot of space. That's quite an intimidating sort of body language. It's quite an intimidating sort of presence, as it were. And we don't want to intimidate people. The consequences of this behavior is you make enemies, upset others and yourself, and you'll feel angry and resentful. And the number of times I've worked with people with issues with anger and frustration, and they say, I hated myself after my outburst. It's really, really common. So now we're going to talk about assertive. So some of the body language sort of assertive things. So hands are open, friendly, appropriate gestures. So really, really simple way to view this is imagine someone was talking to you like they had their hands like this, blah, 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 blah. And now imagine someone's talking to you with their hands like this, blah, 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 blah. Now, one is I'm telling you this is what's going to happen. And the other is I'm open to ideas. This is what I suggest kind of thing. Posture is relaxed. So yeah, they're going to have an open posture, but they're not going to have this aggressive sort of stance where they're trying to take up as much space as possible. A bit like a cat when it's threatening another cat, will arch its back up and take up as much space as possible. It's someone who's comfortable in their own skin and relaxed, is opening and welcoming. The eyes are warm, welcoming, friendly, making comfortable eye contact, but not necessarily trying to stare you out like they're bluffing you in a poker game. But like a healthy amount of eye contact. The consequences with this sort of communication is good relationship with others. You're overall happy with the outcome and you are able to compromise. You can see that confidence does not just affect our verbal communication and the way we think, but also our body language. We want to focus on building our assertiveness. This is an important factor in building our self-confidence. We do this by using assertive language, not passive, not aggressive. Saying what you mean what you say, but don't say it in a mean way is an easy way to think about it. Practice assertiveness is not telling people off or putting people in their place. It is creating a sense that you have rights and needs as an individual and allows others to understand and respect your personal boundaries. So an example might be you carrying some shopping into the house, into the flat, let's be real, and someone offers to help, but you don't know them, you're a little bit creeped out by them for whatever reason, and you don't want them in your flat. So passive might go, oh, okay, maybe just take a bag, despite your feelings that you don't trust this person. Aggressive would be like, get the hell away from me, don't come near me, I don't want you in my house. And an assertive communication would be, no thanks, I'm all good. Practicing assertiveness is not telling people off, but it places personal boundaries, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes when we are upset or pushed to our limit, we might say these statements. You are wrong. You don't care. You hurt me. You may have been a passive communicator, but a situation has pushed you to use aggressive language to assert your boundaries or feelings. This can lead to more arguments or the individual shutting off communication completely. Assertive language uses I statements to focus the conversation on you and your needs and not blaming the other person. So instead of saying, you are wrong, you are saying, I don't agree. This takes time and practice to build up assertive language, but it is something you can start to implement today. I go through this quite a lot in another workshop that you can find on this YouTube channel. There is a link to the page on our channel. The title of the workshop is Self-Confidence and Assertiveness, and I break this down into a little bit more detail then. But what I will do is I will talk you through the example that I always give regarding assertive language, especially with this passive to aggressive sort of situation. And the way that I frame it is the doing the dishes. What I see very often in relationships, when I'm doing relationship sort of advice, is someone being passive to the point that a situation does not get resolved and they react in an aggressive manner. So the example that I always see is the dishes. So one partner cooks, one partner cleans. And despite the fact that you cooked every night this week, your partner did the dishes. So let's say it's Saturday. Your partner did the dishes on Tuesday. They haven't done it this week, and there's quite a bit of dirty washing lying on the side of the sink. Now, you didn't say anything on Wednesday. You didn't say anything on Thursday. You didn't say anything on Friday. And then on Saturday, you exploded. This is not good enough, etc., etc., etc. You don't value me. You're not doing anything for me, etc. What I encourage is I encourage assertively saying things early. So on the Tuesday, you notice the dishes aren't done, sort of gently say, I've noticed that you haven't done the dishes. Could you maybe find some time to do it later today? Oh, yeah, sure, sort of thing. And then, I mean, mistakes happen. People forget these sort of things. And then it happens again on Wednesday. You go, hey, I mean, I noticed that you've done this now 2 days in a row. I would really appreciate if you could do it before tomorrow. Just like, please. No problem. Yeah, I'll do it. They don't do it. Next day, same thing happens. It's now Friday, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed. You haven't done. I've noticed that the dishes haven't been done still. The dishes haven't been washed since Monday. The reason I keep asking you this is because I cook, you clean. It's something we agreed on a while ago. That's like how we split it up. I mean, I'll happily clean if you want to cook sometime. But when you don't do the cleaning after I've done the cooking, it makes me feel that you don't value me, that I value us more than you value us. And that makes me feel hurt. And that's really the only reason that I want you to do this. I could do the dishes, but it's more because we had this agreement. We're a team. We're supposed to be in this together. And I just feel a bit ignored. So you can see how there's that slight difference into saying, you don't care about me, you don't value me, you can't be bothered, you're always like this. You see how there's that subtle, there's the accusational sort of language, and then there is the we're a team, I feel this way, and when you don't do this, it makes me feel this way, which is why I'd rather you do this kind of thing. Of course, we've got some extra notes on assertive language. So say no when you want to mean it. So the word no is quite powerful, so use it. You can tone it down by offering alternatives. So instead of saying no, you can say, no, I'm not sure about that. Can we try this instead? But I will say, and this is something I say to my clients as well, no is a complete sentence. If you say no, you don't necessarily have to qualify it. So for the example I gave earlier with the groceries, if you say no, I'm okay, thank you, and the person says, oh, why don't you want some help? You don't have to give a reason for it. You can just say, it's just because I'm okay, but thank you for the offer, kind of thing. Express understanding of the other person's perspective, and if you don't understand, ask. This doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it is better to have a better understanding as to what the other person thinks, and at least you can understand why they're coming from where they're coming from. Deliver your message to the person that matters, not to everyone else but the person. It's kind of a bit self-explanatory. Avoid exaggerations or accusationally statements. Not sure that's the right word, but such as you always, you constantly, you never, you are the most, you don't care. All of these things are very accusational and very much exaggerated because I'm sure the person does care. So in closing, I've talked about dealing with stress and ways you can deal with stress. I have taught you to not ignore how you feel, but instead to lean into it. We talked a little bit about practicing self-compassion, and I talked about the self-compassion journal and stuff like that, and how you need to use mindfulness. But see our other workshops for that. We also have a mindfulness practice on this YouTube channel. it's important to, and finally, effective communication being key. It's so important, communication. It's everything in many ways. If you can effectively communicate both with yourself and with others. So, I mean, a part of the self-compassion and not ignoring how you feel is communication with oneself. You communicate what is going on, what do I feel, why do I feel this way, how do I feel physically? Oh, is my physical feelings related to my mental feelings? How are my emotions impacting on how my mind is working? How is my mind then impacting on how my body is feeling? Could I relax my body? Would that then calm my mind down and then allow me to look at my emotions in a different way? All you see, this is all communication. And then when you're communicating with others, it's sort of showing, I am a person that deserves to be valued and recognized. This is what I think. I'm happy to meet a middle ground, as I understand that you are also a person that has rights and values and is I mean, there's not one world of 8 billion people on it, there's 8 billion worlds, and everybody's world is slightly different, and everybody's world is made up of different parts, and everyone has different experiences and all these sort of things. And all this stuff allows you to communicate, understanding that self-awareness and having that self-communication with yourself will then allow you to communicate more effectively with others. All these things are important. But yes, being assertive rather than aggressive and passive was the shorthand for what that last lit was about. Some useful apps and resources. So Sleepio is a free guided self-program based on cognitive behavioral therapy principles. It addresses insomnia through different techniques, and one of them is sleep restriction. You can see what sleep restriction is in one of the other videos on this YouTube channel, where someone in my team goes through it live with someone else. The great thing is that Sleepio calculates the sleep efficiency for you, so you don't even need the YouTube video. Sleepio only takes a couple of weeks, and it's only a session a week, and then you implement the techniques over the course of that week. So it's very much cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. The other things that you can see there: stop, breathe, and think, headspace, calm, mindfulness, self-compassion, all these sort of things. So meditation, 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 as I always tell clients, really good, really important. Even if you're just counting your breaths to 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you get to 10, 9, 10, 1, 2. Just doing that with your eyes closed for 10 minutes at a time. If you do that every day, you're going to notice real benefits in a month or two, 100% guaranteed. But yeah, there's a lot of apps out there. There are also some more resources here. I will copy and paste all of these links into the description below. Asking for support. So this is easier when it's a group workshop and I'm in person. Sutton Uplift offers support, cognitive behavioral therapy. You can also work with someone in my team or get counseling, that sort of stuff. You would self-refer by scanning that QR code that you can see on the screen. The caveat I must mention is that if you are watching this video and you want support from Sutton Uplift, you have to live in Sutton or have a GP registered in Sutton. But what I will do, what I will say, is that if you Google IAPT near me, you will find the equivalent of my service, which is a mental health service run by the NHS. You will find an equivalent of that near you. So those letters are I for indigo, A for ambiguous or animal. We'll go with animal. So I for indigo, A for animal, P for pink, and T for terrifying. So IAPT near me in Google, and you're going to find something there for you. So finally, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you have managed to take, even if it's just one thing from this, it will be very much worth my time. And I'll see you in the next video.